Thanks for joining us today to discuss life and godliness with Rick and Angela Carter. If you'd like to be part of the conversation, email us at cartersforhope@gmail.com. That's Carters, the number 4, hope@gmail.com. Any questions you have, we'll discuss in future episodes. Right now, sit back and let's join in on the conversation. Good morning or afternoon, whenever you are listening, and we are back with our newest podcast. We've done podcasts before, but it's our new podcast, Life and Godliness, and this is episode number 2. Yeah, and we're excited today to be able to spend a little time and record a bit today, and it's we're actually going to do several podcasts today because the next 3 weeks we're going to be kind of in a place where we're not going to be able to do much recording with different travel. We're traveling out to California and Oklahoma and California, and then back and to Ohio, and so we're pretty excited about all of that. And I'm going to tell you right now, there's going to be some weird sounds as we are doing this podcast. Clicking, click, bam,
yes. Repeated.
Because there is a cardinal in the bushes right next to our fifth wheel, and it's the state bird of Ohio, and it wants us to leave, I think, because it just flies repeatedly into the side of the fifth wheel, into the windows, just bam, bam, bam. So if you hear...
But it's not just our windows.
No, it does it to the church, too. They said, we have no idea. It's just all day long. It just flies right into the side of the building,
I think it has something wrong with its eyes.
It's a retarded cardinal, and something's wrong with it, so...
So you'll hear it.
If you hear it, that's what it is. So,
right here.
Yeah. Anyway, but we just got done in Hamilton, Ohio, conference here, dealing with emotional issues, and it was a blessing to be here at the church at Bible Way Missionary Baptist Church. And today we're going to talk actually about the topic of joy, and this kind of was spurred on because of an event yesterday. Angela and I like to have fun together. We enjoy each other, and we enjoy life, and just we laugh a lot. It wasn't always that way. There were times early in our marriage where it was very much not that way. No. But we sang yesterday, and they asked us to sing 2 songs, and I hadn't trimmed my mustache in a few weeks, and I was singing, and my mustache was tickling my nose.
Mind you, this is Sunday morning.
Sunday morning, we're singing.
This is the Super Bowl service.
My mustache is tickling my nose, and we got done, and I just had to rub my nose. And I said, man, my mustache is tickling my nose, and I need to trim it. I said, and just off the cuff, there the bird was. I said, my grandma warned me about that, and there the bird was again. And so anyway, Angela, she was,
oh my goodness,
she was struggling with that, and so I just started singing the next song. I thought, just a silly comment. I just started singing the next song, and she's standing there.
I'm trying to get composure.
And I sang the verse, and she is singing with me on the chorus, and she's just looking at me. I mean, she's looking like this big grin, and she's got these big eyes, and
because I couldn't look out in the auditorium because I would laugh, and I didn't want to look down. I thought that would be rude, so I was trying to look at him, but then when I looked at him, all I could see was his mustache.
So I'm standing there, like, thinking, my goodness, she is really admiring me right now. She really is in love with me, and she is just giving me the I love you so much look. And so then, anyway, we get done singing, and I preach, and then we come home, and that's when I found out that she was actually standing there thinking to herself, I cannot believe
he did that to me.
Right before we're singing. and so it wasn't love at all.
No,
It was,
he knows I can't control myself.
so anyway, we laughed about that
All day
yesterday, and
still this morning, obviously.
yeah. So, but I know this, and I think that I think laughter is good. The Bible says so. It says laughter is good, does good like a medicine.
Yeah.
And we are very healthy.
Scientists say that laughing burns more calories than running, but I don't see that effect.
We enjoy laughing, and we enjoy just life in general. And I know that we're in a culture right now where there's so much depression, there's so much discouragement. In ministry, there's a lot of discouraging things. Having pastored for 25 years, I know that, and we spend a lot of time around pastors and missionaries, and it can be very discouraging, and it can be overwhelming. We can let it just overwhelm us, and we can lose that joy. We can lose the joy of life and the joy of laughter. And if we're not careful, we can really fixate on the bad things, on the negative things. And
one thing I appreciate about this church is, I made the joke, that it's, Super Bowl Sunday, it's the main service. But, I think sometimes you have to be careful that you could be too perfect and too stuffy that even the Holy Spirit can't even sit in there. And I appreciated the church here. They just rolled with it. Right. They were very gracious. And
Angela made us mugs for the podcast.
Yeah. So anyway, but so I just appreciated that. And I don't think it hindered the spirit whatsoever at all.
No, not at all.
So it was really good. But
yeah, absolutely.
And it was fun for me for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
And into this morning.
So we're going to talk about joy. We're going to talk about joy. And we'll talk about it from a couple different perspectives here. And just the concept and the principles of it and the application of it, really. So, first, we know that God wants us to be joyful. He says that in Ephesians chapter number 5. We're told that we're to be filled with the Spirit, and part of the evidence of that is that we're to singing to yourselves in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, making melody in your heart to the Lord. That's a joyful spirit, and then accompanying that, the thankfulness that's in the verse number 20, and the humility that's in verse number 21. So there's just a lot of evidence there to me that when you're filled with the Spirit, there's going to be a joy, and we know that Galatians chapter 5 tells us that it's part of the fruit of the Spirit, right? That the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, and it's a wonderful thing to know that when you're walking with God, when you're right with Him, and you're spending time in His presence, that there's joy. Yeah. Philippians tells us in Philippians chapter number 4, rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say rejoice. And I really do believe Philippians 4 is the culmination of all the things there in Philippians, as you put on the mind of Christ throughout that book, and in chapter number 1 you're putting on the gospel filter and letting the gospel be the filter of your mind, and I always teach and encourage there it is encourage people to live the gospel, that the gospel being the primary identifier of how to walk in the Spirit. And if Christ died because of something, then we should die to it. And if Christ lives because of something, we should live for it. And that being what's presented 5 different ways there in Philippians 1. And he goes on, but he culminates there with having a mind that is secure, a mind that is fortified against the troubles and the problems, because we all have problems. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But we don't have to let the problems dominate our mind. We can have joy even in the midst. We can rejoice in the Lord always, even in the midst of troubles. And I think that we miss that a lot.
Yeah. Because we let them dominate us. We let them dominate our thinking, our feelings, and our all of that, instead of us bringing those things underneath our control. We let them control us.
Yeah, and that is what the Bible, I mean, he says in Philippians 4:8, think on these things, meaning we get to choose what we think about. Mm-hmm. And we get to choose whether we're going to think about the troubles and problems, or whether we're going to think about those things that are just and holy and true and pure and so forth. And so, having that choice, we learned a long time ago to do a daily, what we call a stroke file, just writing down things that you're grateful for, things that you're thankful for. And we used to do that with one another when we first started in 1999, when we got marital counseling from Brother Mike Hayes. He taught us that to take a 3x5 card, and on the front write, 3 things in the morning, noon, and night that you're thankful for to God, and then 1 thing that you're thankful for about your spouse. And it was helpful, because we had gotten to the place where we really were only looking,
saw the negative,
both in marriage and in life in general. And we were miserable all the time. We fought, and we had conflict, and we were upset. And, you don't have to be that way. You can rejoice. And I think sometimes a lot of people have this idea that, well, that's just how I am. I'm just not a happy person. I'm just not a joyful person. But that's not what the Bible would indicate.
No, you make the choice. It's 100% your choice.
So from a lady's perspective, and I want to kind of delve into this from a lot of different angles, okay? But I do want to hit this, because I think it affects things in a different way for ladies than it does for men. Not that men don't deal with hormonal changes in life; they do. We do.
We know.
But more so for ladies early on in their life, where it's a regular occurrence, and then throughout life.
I feel like it's more dramatic for ladies.
It's certainly.
The changes are more
we feel
dramatic.
that way too, actually.
I know.
Speaking for all men. Anyway, we'll talk about that for a second, though. Talk about how do those hormonal changes relate to this topic? Because, I don't feel like being happy today is a real thing that you've expressed to me at this point in.
Yeah, I struggle with it actually quite often, because, like yesterday it was cloudy and rainy, and I really did struggle with the feeling of being down. I tend to be that way when there's no sunshine. When today it's all sunny, I feel refreshed and happy. So when it is, you have days like that, and I feel for people that live in places that are cloudy all the time, because I just could not do it. But it is. I do have to get up and have to tell myself, okay, you really have no reason to feel this way. It's just a feeling. You don't have to give in to it. I can choose to be different. And that was obvious on Sunday.
Yeah. Does that work for you?
It does most of the time, especially if I know it's not, if it's just environment related, But if hormone related, it's a little bit harder, because it's harder to change those feelings. But I have to not let them run me. I have to make choices contrary to how I'm feeling, regardless, even though I know that that this is just a feeling, I just have to choose. I'm not going to give in to being angry today or being sad today, because I just know it's my body trying to be dumb and retarded. So I've just got to be better than that. And
so I think early in life.
But I didn't know that when we were first married.
Well, that's what I mean. Early in life, you don't know why you feel a certain way. And that was probably one of the hardest times for us.
Yeah.
When, you felt a certain way, so you responded a certain way. And then I didn't respond properly to you and that's my, so it wasn't like I'm not saying that was all her. That was also me not responding right. And then there were times that I was off and she responded wrong to me too. I mean, it goes both ways, right? And so, the reality is, though, for a lot of it, we didn't even know why do we feel this way?
Yeah.
And so, what were some? Do you remember some things that helped you to be able to learn to identify the source of that, as far as?
I don't know, like, necessarily specific things other than, like, when we went to counseling with Brother Hayes, you know, he really talked a lot about the physical, he talked a lot about the mental and the spiritual, and so, you know, I had to take stock, okay, what time of the month is it? You know, am I reacting this way because my hormones are crazy? All right, if it's not that, then, you know, what have I been thinking on? What have I been dwelling on? And then the spiritual, have I been walking with the Lord? So I like looked at all three of those things. I like had to do a check with all three. And I still do that now. Even, did I miss my, because I had to have a hysterectomy. I take hormone replacement. So now I'm like, all right, did something happen? Did I miss hormones in a couple of days? Is this what this is? Or have I missed my devotions? Or, you know, all those things. I take all of that into stock and analyze that and then make my decisions based on those.
I think on the physical level, sometimes people confuse the idea of that period for a lady versus ovulation.
Yeah, because I didn't know the difference when
And
we were first married.
Ovulation is the time when you struggled the most.
Yes.
And partly because I think there was no manifestation or physical manifestation to say, well, this is why I feel this way.
Right.
And so keeping a calendar helped
Yes.
us immensely
Yes.
to know, okay, there's hormonal changes going on right now. And we know it gave a why.
Yeah.
It didn't change the feelings really, but it
But
gave
then
a
I
why.
could-
Then you could manage.
Then
the
I could
feelings.
manage it. I'd be like, okay, I know why I feel this way, so I know I definitely need to choose to be different.
Yeah.
So.
And you feel like that is a choice. It's not.
Yes, it is
It's
a
not an
choice.
excuse.
No.
It's a choice.
Maybe I'm not as bubbly.
It might not be as easy to
Right.
do.
And I know everybody, like when we pastored at Beth Haven, I tried to be who I was everywhere I went. So there were times when I would come into church and I was in a good mood, happy mood, bubbly, laughy, all of that. And then there were times I would come in and I just, for whatever reason, I just felt sad that day and, you know, more mellow and all of that. And people are like, are you okay? Are you okay? I am. I just feel this way today, you know. But I wasn't rude or mean or nasty or any of those things. I just felt
That's
that
not what
way.
I heard.
Anyway, but you know, you can choose to give into that feeling and respond accordingly, or you can recognize you have those feelings and respond a different way.
So, you know, we've talked here a fair amount here about the ladies, but you know, for men it's the same. And you know, the reality is those three areas: the physical, the thinking, and the spiritual. In men it's the same thing we have to face and take on. I said this to Angela here. I was just thinking about this not long ago, about the physical aspects to having joy and peace and feeling that way. I mean, I'm talking about the physical side of it. That bird loves this trailer. Anyway. You know, I definitely believe, and I know biblically and scientifically, that how we eat affects us.
Yeah.
You know, we eat such terrible processed foods here in America and such bad dietary things. The poor people in the Philippines, this is what I told Angela, I was thinking the poor people in the Philippines eat fresh fish, fresh fruit, fresh veg, they drink coconut water. I mean, that's what they eat and drink. And the poor people here eat hot dogs and bologna and Doritos and you know, Twinkies and drink Coca-Cola. And I mean, it's all chemicals and all processed and it's just unhealthy. And I do think that our diet affects our general mood. I mean, I know how I feel if I've eaten some things that, you know, are not healthy. I just don't feel as good, and that's going to affect my mood. Mm-hmm. And we do try to really to eat right. You know, to eat. When we control our diet, which we don't always because of, you know, what we do and being with pastors and churches and various things. But we eat, meat and veg. We really try and eat organic as much as possible. We take vitamins and minerals to help supplement where we need. So we try and think about the dietary side, but also there's the physical side. And I know there's a study I read in a book, Depression is Contagious. It's not a Christian book, but it is an intriguing book. But he cites a study in there that 30 minutes of exercise 3 times a week does more or does as much to change your mood and your eliminate depression as the number one antidepressant on the market. Mm-hmm. And I was reading the other day, we were talking about this because I was reading how the muscles they've discovered release a particular molecule when you exercise, when you exert your muscles, and they're calling it the hope molecule. And is that what I said? Hope molecule or something like that.
Hope enzyme or something. I don't know.
Anyway, I think I may have said that. It might not be hope. Anyway, it's directly related to make that you feel better when you've exercised, and it's only released when you exert your muscles and stuff. And so there's definitely a physical aspect to this, and I would never discount that. God created us as a whole being, right? Not just as one part. But then that thinking process I think is so key, and then the spiritual side, having a real walk with God, and having biblical thinking as a result of that, and being willing to identify where our thoughts differ from God's, and not being so arrogant as to think that we're just always right or we're right about everything we think. But being willing to let God correct our thinking, that's such a huge thing.
Well, and then too, I think also the next aspect of that as well is communicating with each other about how you're feeling, because I know for myself, whenever I would, feel all crazy and I would wake up in the morning and I would tell you, look, I don't know what's wrong today. I feel like today is not going to be a great day for me. Mm-hmm. Then you were also very cautious not to respond to my craziness. You helped me be like, okay, now I know you're not feeling good, but you can't do that.
Right. Well, but you got to do that without being
but you didn't
condescending,
do it in anger or frustration. You did it out of genuine care and concern, and so then that helped me like, okay, yeah, that's right. I gotta get my mouth under control. I gotta get my thinking under control.
Well, and I think part of that goes to when you praise each other and you regularly. I'm talking about building an atmosphere. Is one of the things I talk about in counseling with communication is building an atmosphere of praise, where you continually, regularly praise one another and share the things that you appreciate about each other. It builds a spirit of goodwill where before that time, everything that one of us would say to the other about something like that would be taken as, well, you're attacking me, you're criticizing me, you don't like me, or things like that. Right. But after that time, now, if we say something to each other, it is in love, and it is because we care about each other, and it's received that way for the, almost always. Yeah. There can be moments, but it's very seldom that there's a moment where it's not received that way. Of hey, are you struggling today? Is there are you having a bad day? And we're normal. Everybody has bad days.
We just had one the other day, and we both made the comment, man, we hadn't had one of these in a long time. Where we just felt like we were butting heads.
It was just a frustrating day.
Yeah. So.
We
didn't yell at each other. We didn't fight.
No, just it was.
But you
just
could
one
tell
of those
we
days.
just weren't on the same. We weren't going the same direction.
Wavelength. But so that brings though up this topic, and we've kind of been nudging in on it, and but about the marriage specifically and joy in the marriage, and I love that Proverbs 5, I think it's verse 18. Says that rejoice with the wife of thy youth. Yeah. And there is to be a joy between us. And I'm going to say this, and this is not a child's podcast, and so I'm not going to I'm going to say talk about some topics here that aren't for children, but before we do, I'll always give a caution here. But the context of Proverbs 5, when it talks about rejoicing with the wife of your youth, it very clearly then talks about the intimate relationship, and that's part of the joy of marriage. And I believe that biblically speaking, when we look at intimacy, the Genesis gives us this statement in Genesis that God put Adam and Eve together there, and He said, "Be fruitful and multiply," and He said, "You should be one flesh." And that phrase "one flesh" is used repeatedly. Jesus used it. And in Corinthians, Paul does something really intriguing in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, where he says that it's one flesh, that he that is joined to a harlot is one flesh, and he that is joined to the Lord is one spirit. And he connects this idea of what does it mean to be one flesh? It's not one soul. It's not one spirit. It's not soulmates. One flesh is talking about physical intimacy. From the very beginning, that's what he's talking about. Paul makes that clear in 1 Corinthians 6. But he likens it to this. He says it's just like when you're joined to the Lord, you're one spirit, and God wants to have that intimate fellowship with you. So he likens the physical union of intimacy between a man and his wife to being like being joined to the Lord. He says to a harlot, but he there very clearly says this is not what God intends. He wants you to be married. He wants that to be within the confines of marriage. That's 1 Corinthians chapter 7. And so putting that context there, you go, okay, so this really properly understood, that physical is a picture of the spiritual, and I believe that always that's how the scriptures are. It gives us the spiritual and the physical, and they're not opposed to one another. They're mirrors of one another. And I teach this. I get all kinds of weird responses to this.
Yes, you do.
But this is very biblical, based on 1 Corinthians 6, and based on other passages in the scriptures, as Paul talks in chapter 7. Because the context of chapter 7 very clearly is talking about physical intimacy and rendering one another due benevolence and so forth. And he gives that likeness to Christ. And I think, okay, well, how often does Christ want to be intimate with us? He wants daily intimacy with us. He wants to be with us daily, intimately, spiritually, right? Yeah. It's not odd that a man wants that with his wife.
No. Because
we're in the image of Christ, right? I mean, we're to be Christ represented in the home in that sense, right? As Ephesians 5 kind of gives that picture. And so when we have that desire, it's interpreted because of the perversion of our culture. And a lot of ladies have allowed this culture to pervert their thinking about this also. Mm-hmm. It's interpreted as he's some kind of a sex fiend. He's some kind of a pervert, that he would want to be intimate every day. What's wrong with him? And the truth is, there's nothing wrong with him. And I'm not saying, so please don't misunderstand, I'm not saying that you have to be intimate every day. I'm not saying that. But I do believe that there ought to be such a relationship between you, such a pursuit of spiritual, emotional, intellectual intimacy between you, that it would not be odd for that to culminate in physical intimacy every day. Right. And I think and I'm just telling you, in a lot of relationships, it's so the opposite of that. Yeah. And we counsel sometimes folks who haven't been intimate with each other in weeks, months, and sometimes years. And that's not biblical. No. And no wonder there's a lack of joy in their home. Yeah. And lack of joy in their marriage, because when the Bible says rejoice with the wife of your youth, that's part of that rejoicing together. And there is a joy that God put in that intimate relationship.
Yeah, I agree.
So Angela loves when I talk about this, obviously, like every woman would. But at the same time, it's not just it shouldn't just be a joy for the man.
No. I from the lady's perspective, I mean, whenever, like you talked about just a few minutes ago, the environment of praise and all of that, when we're doing that during the day, like I do want to admire you like you thought I was on Sunday.
Woo! We're gonna end this podcast. Start smooching.
No.
Anyway, no. I'm just kidding.
But that warm feeling is there.
Yeah, both ways. Absolutely, both ways. So there's that joy in marriage. Mm-hmm. There's a joy. There ought to be a joy in the home, broadly speaking.
Yeah.
With your kids.
Yeah.
Laughing with your kids.
I love laughing with the kids.
And carrying on.
Yeah.
And I know that there has to be discipline.
And there's seriousness and work. And
certainly so. Yeah, there's certainly the training process.
But the home shouldn't be a drudgery.
No.
There should be joy in the home.
And if a home's dominated by anger, that's not God.
No.
That's not a godly home.
When our kids were very little, our home was not right. So it was
because we weren't right.
It was hard. Like I struggled and it seemed miserable and all of those things. But then once our home got fixed, you and I got fixed, then I enjoyed the kids. I enjoyed every stage of the kids. Everyone kept saying, "Oh, yeah, you're having fun now, but wait till they're teenagers." I loved the teenage years.
They were wonderful years.
I loved the married years. I love the kids being married. I love our Marco Polos. I like joking with them and, hearing their days. And, now I love the grandkids stage where the grandkids are getting old enough they can text and they send jokes and all of those things. I love it. I love our family.
Yeah.
I love that we love to have joy together.
Yeah, and a lot of the reason we love to be around each other is because we have joy.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be around people that are angry and I think that's something that folks need to consider. And I think if you're a man who has a lot of anger, and this bird is just nonstop.
It's like
if you're a guy or a woman, either way, because it can be both.
Yes.
Either or both. That has a lot of anger, and you're thinking, if my wife, if my husband, if my family would just this, they would stop making me angry. You need to know that it is no one makes you angry.
No.
It's you. It's your choices. It's your understanding. And in our next podcast, we're really going to delve into that topic and where that really stems from. And I'm going to give a personal testimony about dealing with my own anger. But, if you struggle with anger and you feel like there's just really no joy in your home, in your marriage, and, in your ministry, honestly, ministry changed for me when I stopped letting anger dominate me, and I was able to enjoy people in the church. I was able to enjoy the work of the ministry instead of being so frustrated with it all the time. And I think that, you hear a lot about pastors and missionaries who fall. Unfortunately, we just heard about another one this past week, and it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. But I know this: if the marriage was right, that wouldn't likely happen.
No.
If there was joy, like there ought to be, that wouldn't likely happen.
No.
I mean, I'm not saying never, but it's so much less likely.
And it's a choice. That's why I struggle, because I didn't grow up in Christian home. I didn't grow up with the terms and the expectation of this be this way, be that way. And yet still when we got married, our marriage was, I brought in my baggage, you brought in your baggage, and we had to figure out how to set the baggage aside and be what God wanted us to be. And it's a choice. You make the choice to change. I don't understand when especially ladies, when they say, I just can't get past this. I just can't. Yes, you can. It is a choice. It's a matter of setting your will down and letting God lead you and doing that choice. And you can have a happy home. You don't have to be in a miserable marriage.
Yeah, but you have to humble yourself,
Yeah.
and you have to accept the cross as sufficient for the offenses of the past, and you have to make the decision to stop taking offense at everything.
Yeah.
You know, you have to have meekness. That's the biblical concept of meekness, is not taking offense at everything. And so often I think we've become offended, and we're just determined to not stop being offended almost. I mean, like, there's nothing you can do to make me happy because I've decided to be offended. And you have to make that decision to be biblical instead of right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, I'm right. Well, okay, maybe you're right. Maybe you're just right in your own eyes, right? But the reality is that being right isn't what makes a person happy.
No.
And being right with God is.
Yeah.
But being right, so everyone knows you're right, big deal. Be right with God.
Right.
And be right with your spouse. And be right with your kids. And be right with your church.
There were many times we had to go to the kids and apologize and be like, I'm sorry, we had the wrong
yeah, we messed this up.
attitude or whatever it was. And, you know, and I think that's one of the things that really adhered the kids' heart to us, is they knew that, you know, we weren't doing these things, you know, to hurt them or to punish them or all those things. They knew we were learning and striving to be right with God just as much as they were. And so it did mesh us together more, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So anyway, let me say this, if you are in ministry, pastor, missionary, evangelist, it doesn't matter. On staff at a church, it doesn't matter to us. If you're struggling in your marriage, if your family is struggling and you're feeling the weight of it, if you're dealing with depression, anxiety, and just not having the peace of God, please reach out to us. That is a significant part of what we believe God's ministry is for us, is having, we say it, God's called us to help churches help the hurting, from the pulpit to the pew to the public. And that meaning, if those in the pulpit are hurting, they need help. And we believe God wants to have us to be a part of helping. I believe the church ought to be helping the pastor, by the way, also. The church ought to be helping the missionary. But sometimes there's barriers there, just, you know, because of relationships and various different things. Maybe you don't feel like you have someone you can go to. I want you to know that you can reach out to us. We're not going to judge you. We have been in that place. And we're just so grateful that God rescued us from that place.
And we've always looked at it from the time Brother Hayes helped us. From then on, we've just like, all right, we've got to help others.
Absolutely.
With what God has helped us with.
Yeah. And then I know this, when a pastor and his wife and a missionary and their wives are healthy and their relationship is right, then they can help people in the church more.
Yeah.
And when a church is healthy, it can help people in the community more, in the public more. And so, you know, it really is a snowball effect in many ways. And it may be that your ministry is successful, but your marriage is a failure. Don't let that success in the ministry keep you from getting help for your family, because it's going to be that much better.
Yeah.
And
because you can have joy.
You can have joy. Woohoo! Yeah. You can laugh at each other.
Yeah.
I mean, with each other.
Both.
Anyway, all right. Well, next time we're going to talk about expectations in both in personal, family, ministry, and how they impact, and a biblical perspective on that. And to me, I think it's one of the most important topics, and it's really a foundational topic that leads to so many more problems if we're not careful. That it needs to be addressed. And so, if you want to ask questions, if you want to reach out to us, do so at
Carter's, 4, hope@gmail.com.
I make her say it because I misspelled it last time.
Yeah, and it's your name.
I know. Praise God for auto check. Y'all have a wonderful day.